This is Seventh Generation Warfare, and I'm your current host, John Nelson. In this episode, we will be talking about being outside the social sexual hierarchy. Why am I discussing the social sexual hierarchy? Some of you may have never even heard the concept. I've heard about it for some time now. I first heard about it from the person who came up with the concept, Fox Day, but recently on Facebook, I had a conversation with somebody who told me I sounded like a Sigma, and I asked him, "Oh, you've heard about the social sexual hierarchy?" He said yes, and I talked to him a little bit further. He had no idea where the concept came from. He also used it in conjunction with the Myers-Briggs test. You can be the four letters, um, and it was just out there in society. He had no concept where it came from. So the idea is gaining popularity and is spreading. And my goal in this video is to get ahead of the concept, as some of you may not have heard of it, and hopefully frame it in a light that is more applicable uh, to sixth and seventh generation warfare, for which I don't think it it has good explanation explanative. I can't figure out that word. Explanatory power for how men might act in society, but it's not healthy for sixth or seventh generation warfare. What is social sexual hierarchy? I'm going to give a very quick rundown because this is my second time making the video. The first time I went into definitions and it became really boring. So, there are two aspects to the social sexual hierarchy: the social aspect and the sexual aspect. Social aspect, let me back up. Social sexual hierarchy only applies to men, sorry, women. But there is the social aspect, of which how other men view you and whether or not they'd follow you, put you in a leadership role, anything like that. And then there's the sexual aspect of how well you are liked by women. Like, do women want to marry you or get you to impregnate them or anything like that? So, social and sexual together into one hierarchy. There are basically two ways I see of viewing the social sexual hierarchy. The very broad stroke of, are you generally, and there's a couple different positions: alpha, bravo, delta, gamma, sigma, omega, and lambda. I'm not going to explain them all. Are you one of those things? And then more specifically, what might you be in a specific environment, such as a workplace? Are you in a leadership role? Do you actually fulfill that leadership role, like as an alpha? Do men want to follow you in that specific role? But it doesn't necessarily speak to you or any of them in their broader life. Some places where hierarchies can be good are like war, or in competitive sports teams, or in business, where there is a collection of people working towards a common goal, and it benefits to have a hierarchy so there aren't 1,000 chiefs working in opposition to each other. You need one chief, and if one competent person is at the helm, that's your best chance to succeed. Other people subordinate themselves to the competent person, and everyone wins. And I think part of the reason why the social sexual hierarchy concept is taking off is a lot to do with the competitive sport team prevalence in our society. That a lot of men grow up playing competitive team sports, not necessarily more individual sports. Myself, in high school I was a runner and I was a swimmer, things like that. That more individualized sports, as opposed to playing football or something where, like, there's a kind of a captain, or the QB is kind of like in charge, or anything like that. And then there's also the aspect that hierarchies also tend to form in like prison environments, and I include public schools in the definition of prison environments, places where people are artificially put into crammed spaces, they are in proximity, and groups will start to form, and each group is going to appoint some sort of kind of leader. The correlation between schools and prison is very scary if you have not considered it. How are hierarchies abused, though? Hierarchies are abused because they are essentially a pyramid, and energy is being diverted from the top. So in the SSH, deltas are the ones doing the majority of the work, and their energy is being consumed up by the alpha and up the pyramid, and the alphas, potentially the bravos, and the gammas don't really produce anything. They just extract the resources from the rest of the population, but the deltas don't have the confidence or whatever to just be out in the world on their own, so they exchange some of their value for the security of the group. It's very, I don't think it's really possible to be selfless, but that being said, very few alphas even come close to being selfless people, and therefore they will gladly extract the resources from the hierarchy that's below them. They're at the top of the pyramid. They're the eye on the top of the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill, and they're just gladly hoovering it all up. And even in a work environment, really anyone at the top of the pyramid will take advantage of the pyramid. I think alphas more so than other positions. If you in a work environment, you could technically have a delta type personality who is boss, but alphas tend to gravitate there because they are the power hungry ones. And to extrapolate this point about alphas taking credit for things others do, you can look into politics or into history, and you can look at say, somebody like Hitler or Stalin, some historical figure like that, and how often people attribute actions to them that they actually didn't do. So Hitler killed the Jews, or Hitler invaded Poland. I don't think he personally did any of those things. He may have ordered it, and it was carried out by the actions of millions of other people. Now you could by giving that credit to him, you're taking away the credit. And in this instance, we're talking about negative credit, and I don't want it to sound good. He didn't actually perform that. By saying he did, you're negating the actions of others. And certainly the German soldier or whatever, it's fine, hiding their guiltful blame and passing it on to the evil leader, but they are the ones responsible for what they did. Sure, there is some responsibility in encouraging others to do evil acts, but it's not quite the same thing. But because of that, so that's a negative aspect of it. On the other hand, leaders get positive credit for things too. You can think of presidents reducing taxes, or even though it's really an act of Congress and act of every IRS agent, or affecting the economy, when in fact they have very little control over the economy. The economy is made up of the actions of millions and millions of people. So you can see how the people at the top of the pyramid get the credit, and the people at the bottom don't. But there we're just talking about like credit for things. They also extract resources, is the point too. People are willing to pay in. So where am I at on my notes here? So the point being, hierarchies are toxic, and this brings me to the point of the video where I am going to redefine the social sexual hierarchy for you. Even though I know I didn't define the terms for you, you can look at another video if you want to see what Fox Day calls them. So alphas and gammas, I would say, are essentially the same. They're driven by the same fundamental forces in their psyche. They are either hungry for power or they are insecure, and this drives them to want to be at the top of the hierarchy. It just so happens that alphas are more liked by other men and by women, and therefore they are more often elevated to those positions, and 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 are able to maintain those positions, whereas gammas are not as well liked, so they don't tend to elevate to that position, and their actions tend to be more seen as disruptive or ankle biting. But both often fight with each other. Alphas like to fight other alphas when they get on their turf. If they come into their arena, alphas are going to fight alphas, but alphas also love to fight gammas because they see gammas as ankle biting or trying to disrupt what they have built, even though we have determined it's not them who have built it, it's the entire group collectively who has built it. But gammas threaten the legitimacy of the alpha, and therefore there's a lot of conflict there. But gammas aren't liked, so they never get up to the position that alphas do. Because alphas are liked, their antics are excused in a way that gammas are not. So gammas' antics will only further their dislike. Alpha's antics can gain more praise or whatever. So an example of how alpha behavior is excused, special to alphas when not other people in the group, would be, if you remember, during the 2016 election, Trump said he could shoot somebody on the street in broad daylight or something like that and not lose a single vote. And he's probably right. There are way too many people out there who have elevated him to an alpha position, and doing something as horrible as killing somebody in broad daylight would not lose him any support from his followers. So this instinct of people to follow a leader can lead people to do horribly immoral or support horribly immoral things just because they have the insecurity themselves of they don't want to be outside the hierarchy. They like the protection of the hierarchy. They like the feeling that somebody is in control. Maybe it's maybe psychologically the hierarchy comes from some daddy issues that they're longing for a powerful daddy in their life that they never had. I don't know. But the idea that Trump could shoot somebody in broad daylight and not lose a vote is absurd to me, but not absurd to millions of people who would or did vote for him. So alphas and gammas are essentially the same. They want power, and they're driven there by insecurity or just lust for power. Alphas are liked, gammas are not liked. Bravos are an interesting one. They tend to be the wingman of the alpha, and there's two things I see that drive them. Either they have some sort of weird, odd love for the alpha, because they work for the benefit of the alpha more so than themselves, or they're a grifter who is looking to ride the coattails of the alpha. But still, bravos don't like to actually produce anything. They just like the easy coast through the wake, be on the a wakeboarder, behind a boat. The boat is the alpha plowing its way through the seas, and the bravo's the wakeboarder riding behind it. Deltas get stuff done, and they are the ones that provide the value for the hierarchy. That's the only reason the hierarchy can exist, is because deltas are keeping the engines going, but they lack some confidence or skills to go out on their own or be their self-made man. Perhaps the confidence is some sort of they just need the protection of the group. I don't know. Going back to the sports analogy, they find comfort in being the camaraderie of the group sport. They like to succeed or fail along with other people instead of going and doing an individual sport where they can succeed or fail on their own. I have no doubt that deltas can make it on their own, that they can get out of the hierarchy. They just have to understand that they are as worthy and as anybody else. That they are as special, on a spiritual level as anybody else. So they just need to stand up and stop being used, stop giving their resources into the hierarchy. I'm not going to discuss lambdas because they're really outside the social sexual hierarchy, and that they're homosexuals not trying to attract females. Omegas and sigmas are kind of the same, just like alphas and gammas were the same, but they're the same for a different reason. Omegas and sigmas are outside the hierarchy. They don't care to be ruled or to rule others. They march to the sound of their own drum, whatever the saying is, and they're okay with that. Perhaps omegas may have some self-esteem issues, but I think in general, sigmas tend to be self-confident, which is why sigmas are attractive to females. They tend not to struggle to attract a female. Omegas do, because perhaps they shun more social norms, and they can be seen as odd or grungy or gross in some sort of way, because they don't follow the customs that most women are used to, and therefore they're not as attractive to women. But both omegas and sigmas are outside the hierarchy, and that's a good place to be. That's kind of the point of this video, is being outside the hierarchy. So if you are omega type personality, and because of that you have a hard time attracting a mate, you can see it as a blessing too. Whereas a lot of other men who can attract women will tend to elevate physical attractiveness in a potential spouse and go for the prettiest woman. Omegas can take the step back and focus more on the personality and philosophical values of the woman, and find a good mate that way, and that will yield a much longer, better lasting relationship than perhaps an alpha who can attract anybody, is just going for the hottest woman and doesn't care about what her values are. So it can be a blessing. So I've redefined some of the concepts for you. The point is, the overall point is, hierarchies are taking from you. For your 6th generation warfare, you got to stand up and understand that you are worthy. You don't need to be beholden to other people in this life. That other people are not responsible for your success or failure. You might think you're part of a team, but really, at the end of the day, it comes down to you as an individual. What you do to succeed or fail in your life is on your shoulders. And this is all 6th generation warfare. Securing your own will. It's not the alpha's responsibility if you succeed or fail, and stop giving him resources so that he can take the blame. Own it for yourself. And when it comes to 7th generation warfare, do not put your children in hierarchies. Do not subject them to feeling like they need to give to hierarchy. I'm talking about religion, government, all those kind of things. Certainly you can play sports. I'm not shitting on group sports. Competitiveness, but ultimately the competitiveness that you want in your children to have should be self-competition, not competition against an us versus them. That's another thing these hierarchies tend to create, is us versus them mentalities. If you're playing sports or if you're in competition, it should be against who you were yesterday, or looking to better yourself, for yourself and for your children. Model that for your children. They are not beholden to anyone else by nature of living. Seventh generation warfare is about securing the will of your children, and will is defined as desires, abilities, and conscience all mixed in together. And so, if you're part of a religion or part of a government organization or support your government might do things that violate your conscience. So get away from that. It's not part of you. Your religion might fight what you want from this life, your desires in this life that don't actually go against your conscience. So you're not beholden to that. So I hope that makes sense. Be outside the hierarchy. And this is Seventh Generation Warfare. I'm your current host, John Nelson. Have a good night.